Tonight, a special edition of World News Tonight, America on the eve of the high-stakes 2024 presidential election. Kamala Harris and Donald Trump delivering their closing arguments. Tonight, what the final ABC News poll now reveals. And the state of the race tonight in the key battleground states. More than 80 million Americans voting already. Now the campaigns and their ground games, the effort to get voters to the polls on Election Day. Vice President Kamala Harris, her final day of campaigning entirely in Pennsylvania. Barnstorming the state with 4 stops. Her team knocking on 5 million doors in that state alone. Vice President Harris ending her campaign on an optimistic note, not mentioning Donald Trump by name in the last 24 hours. Former President Donald Trump blitzing 3 battleground states in what he says will be his last campaign, asking, are you better off than you were 4 years ago? And continuing the violent rhetoric from his closing days, joking now about reporters at his rallies getting shot. Mary Bruce, Rachel Scott, Rick Klein here on the new poll where this race stands, and John Carl standing by with new reporting, what he's just learned from both campaigns tonight, what they're now saying, how they're feeling about Election Day. Also tonight, the alarming report warning about threats targeting election workers across the country. Authorities taking major steps to protect the vote and the people who count the ballots, including armed guards now, drones, bulletproof glass, and putting the National Guard on standby. Pierre Thomas is here. The other news tonight, the tornado watches as we come on the air. 6 confirmed tornadoes already. Homes across Oklahoma heavily damaged. And now the new tropical storm forming in the Caribbean, the potential track right toward the U.S. The well-known young actor from Dawson's Creek revealing his battle with cancer tonight. The scare on stage, Coldplay's Chris Martin falling through a trap door while performing in concert. And tonight here, the tributes pouring in for music legend Quincy Jones. Behind the scenes at the making of We Are the World. His unforgettable work with so many icons, from Frank Sinatra to Ray Charles to Michael Jackson. Tonight here, Quincy Jones, in his own words.
From ABC News, this is a special edition of World News Tonight with David Muir. Reporting tonight from ABC News Election Headquarters in New York.
Good evening on this election eve. It is great to have you with us here. We are here at ABC News Election Headquarters in New York already. We're in just 24 hours. We will be coming on the air with the first exit polls this time tomorrow night. What voters are saying already. We'll be on the air for hours, perhaps days. We're ready, given how close this election is. The presidential race, the control of the Senate and the House. And we begin tonight here, of course, with the race for the White House. Vice President Harris crisscrossing Pennsylvania, the biggest battleground prize, 19 electoral votes, a must-win state for both campaigns. Our polling shows it is tied in the Keystone State. Her closing message upbeat and optimistic, not mentioning her opponent by name in the last 24 hours. Former President Trump campaigning in 3 battleground states, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, and tonight in Michigan, asking, are you better off than you were 4 years ago? And also making news for his violent rhetoric, now joking about reporters at his rallies getting shot. Both sides know how close this race is. Tonight, more than 80 million Americans have voted already. Millions more are set to go to the polls tomorrow. And tonight on this election eve, here's where the race stands. Our final ABC News IPSOS poll showing Kamala Harris at 49%, Donald Trump at 46%, virtually unchanged in the 3 months since Vice President Harris moved to the top of the ticket. But of course, as you know at home, it all comes down to the Electoral College. And this is the map we'll be watching all night tomorrow night. The race to 270. 270 electoral votes needed to win. And the election will very likely come down to these 7 states, the battleground states, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, North Carolina, Georgia, Arizona, Nevada. The polls, each state virtually tied tonight. You see them right there on the screen. It's going to be a very late night. We have both campaigns covered, and new reporting just in from John Carl tonight, what both campaigns believe behind the scenes on this night before the election. But we start here with ABC's Mary Bruce leading us off on the Harris campaign tonight.
Kamala Harris jetting off to battleground Pennsylvania, tonight barnstorming the must-win state with 4 separate stops on the last full day of her whirlwind campaign. In Scranton, Harris rallying volunteers. She's visited Pennsylvania 18 times since launching her campaign, more than any other battleground. Her team telling us they've knocked on 5 million doors in this state alone.
Are we ready to do this? We're ready to get out the vote? We're ready to win? All right.
Harris has spent weeks painting a dire picture of a second Trump term, but in the past 24 hours, she hasn't mentioned him once by name. Choosing instead to close her campaign on a positive message, returning to the theme of optimism.
Our campaign has tapped into the ambitions and the aspirations and the dreams of the American people. We are optimistic and excited about what we will do together, and we here know it is time for a new generation of leadership in America. And I am ready to offer that leadership as the next president of the United States of America.
Donald Trump today hitting 3 key states, Pennsylvania, Michigan, and North Carolina.
We have to turn out and vote tomorrow. We're going to vote.
But in contrast with Harris, the former president's message at the end of this race increasingly dark. Over the weekend, joking he wouldn't mind if the journalists covering his rally were shot.
And I have this piece of glass here, but all we have really over here is the fake news, right? And to get me, somebody would have to shoot through the fake news. And I don't mind that so much, because I don't mind that.
It comes just days after he imagined guns trained at the face of former Republican Congresswoman Liz Cheney.
She's a radical war hawk. Let's put her with a rifle standing there with 9 barrels shooting at her, okay? Let's see how she feels about it. You know, when the guns are trained on her face.
In the final days, Trump, who lost both the popular vote in 2020 and the Electoral College, insisting he should never have left the White House.
I shouldn't have left. I mean, honestly, because we did so well.
And he's already questioning this election. Today, top election officials in key battlegrounds speaking out, saying the vote is secure. From Michigan.
Candidates don't get to decide who wins elections. Voters do. And so we will keep reminding folks of that truth.
To North Carolina.
I would just, make a plea to the candidates and elected officials. Have a peaceful transition of power. Accept the results. Concede defeat when necessary.
To Georgia's Republican Secretary of State, Brad Raffensperger.
Our systems are secure, and our people are ready. At the end of the day, it's going to be fair and fast and accurate.
Mary Bruce with us here at election headquarters in New York. Here we go, Mary. Election Eve. Let me ask you this, because we've seen the early turnout. It's been really spectacular on both sides. Republican supporters of Donald Trump listened to the former president. They went out early this time because he now supports the early vote. So this really does come down to who you can get out on Election Day to add up to those totals. What is the Harris campaign doing? What do they make of the early vote numbers? Are they concerned by how many Republicans have turned out early? It's a big change.
It is, but David, the Harris team tells me tonight that they are not alarmed by these early vote numbers. They feel strongly that these are voters that would be backing Donald Trump anyway. They're just coming out and voting early. They do not see it as a sign that Donald Trump is reaching out and bringing in new voters. And tonight, the Kamala Harris campaign is touting their ground game. They say Donald Trump's operation just can't compete.
So they're convinced it's ground game on the Harris side and that these are Republican voters who would have come out on Election Day anyway.
Exactly.
All right, well, we'll see. We're going to turn now to the other campaign. Former President Donald Trump closing out his campaign with 3 stops in the battleground states, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, and tonight he'll be in Michigan. ABC's Rachel Scott on the Trump campaign tonight.
Tonight in North Carolina, Donald Trump and the closing argument his team was hoping for in the final days of what he says will be his last campaign.
But I'd like to begin by asking a very simple question. Are you better off now than you were 4 years ago? And I've asked that question so many times that I've never had one hand go up for the other. With your vote tomorrow, I will end inflation. I will stop the invasion of criminals coming into our country.
The former president calling this the end of one journey and the start of a new one.
This is really the end of a journey, but a new one will be starting, and that's the one we've wanted to partake in, which is basically to make America great again, and now we'll have a chance to do it after today.
In these crucial final hours, Trump also taking time to do an interview on the podcast of former New England Patriots coach Bill Belichick.
This is more exciting. I hate to say it, Coach, but this is more exciting than any football game.
The interview in keeping with Trump's strategy to win support among young men, a group that doesn't typically turn out in large numbers. He's featured wrestler Hulk Hogan at his campaign events and recently sat down for a lengthy interview on Joe Rogan's podcast.
Do you want to go with an 80-year-old president?
But one of Trump's most prominent female supporters, former South Carolina Governor Nikki Haley, has warned he could risk alienating women.
This is not a time for them to get overly masculine with this bromance thing that they've got going. 53% of the electorate are women. Women will vote.
Haley spoke at the Republican National Convention, but she has not campaigned with Trump. Still, she published an op-ed in the Wall Street Journal today telling voters to back him.
This will be the golden age of America.
Tonight at a rally in Pennsylvania, the crowd positioned behind the candidate, largely female, holding pink signs reading, "Women for Trump."
Rachel Scott also with us here at election headquarters tonight. Rachel, really the same question for you that I asked Mary. Does the Trump campaign have a real plan here tomorrow to add to the early vote? It's been impressive on the Republican side, but are these voters who would have come out on election day already? Do they plan to add to that tomorrow? What's their plan?
And they're happy with those early vote numbers, David. I'm told that the Trump campaign has 350 campaign offices across those critical 7 battleground states where this race will ultimately be decided. But they're also leaning on some outside political organizations, including one led by billionaire Elon Musk, to really lead some field operations on the ground, hoping that they can energize people who typically do not turn out to vote in person or early on election day, like young male voters, David.
It's all about ground game, which is cliche for a reason, right? Because that's what it comes down to in the end. Rachel Scott, our thanks to you. Now to the polling tonight. I mentioned we have a new ABC News poll. Let's get right over to our political director, Rick Klein, also here. Got his sleeves rolled up already. You're going to be here for days, Rick. But what does the last ABC News poll of the election cycle show?
A 3-point lead for Kamala Harris, 49-46, in what's been a stubbornly close race, start to finish. The gender gap, a big storyline going into tomorrow night. Donald Trump leading among men by 5 points, but Kamala Harris leading among women by 11 points. That gender gap actually widens when you zoom in on independent voters. Harris up 5 among independents overall. And just among independent women, it is Harris plus 18, David.
I know our team at 538 has done the averages in the battleground states. This is really something. We're really heading into tomorrow in a dead heat.
All within the margin of error. Right now, we have Kamala Harris leading by a single point in both Michigan and Wisconsin. We have Trump up very narrowly in Nevada, North Carolina, Georgia, and Arizona. Pennsylvania, absolutely dead even. That is the most important and biggest battleground state. Both campaigns putting all their resources into that state.
90% of the time, the person who wins Pennsylvania wins the presidency. So, Rick, one last question for you about the Des Moines Register poll that came out this weekend. It was a shocker, even for the Harris campaign. It's a red state, and yet their last poll from a very respected political scientist shows that Kamala Harris has now taken the lead in Iowa.
Donald Trump won this state by 8 points, but Kamala Harris is up 3 in this poll right now, and particularly stark, the lead among women and older women in particular. Harris plus 20 among women 65 and older plus 35. Even among older men, it is Harris plus 2.
Rick Klein with us at the big board. Rick, thanks. Let's bring in John Carl, late reporting from the campaigns. John, that poll could be an outlier. Even the Harris campaign acknowledges that, but they say if they can see that in some of the other states, the swing states, the cross currents that we saw there, then perhaps it's an optimistic sign for them. But first question for you, what are you learning from the Trump campaign? How's Donald Trump feeling tonight?
Well, look, the Trump campaign just sent me reams of data saying that they are ahead in the early vote, that they're doing everything they need to do to win. But I have to tell you, talking to senior advisors, people that have been advising Trump for a long time, I am hearing newfound anxiety. They say he has been off message. One very close advisor and friend of Donald Trump's for a long time told me it's as if he is trying to lose. He is not closing it out on the message that you heard Rachel Scott say that his campaign wants him to close it out on.
But the Harris campaign has got to be feeling anxiety, too. You saw from Rick Klein, Pennsylvania is tied. It's a must-win for both campaigns.
Look, they've been feeling anxiety for a long time, but they also feel like this is closing in the right direction for them. They believe, David, that Madison Square rally 8 days ago was a turning point in this campaign.
All right, John Carl, Mary Bruce, Rachel Scott, Rick Klein, everybody's here. Everybody's ready to go. This campaign season has seen an extraordinary level of threats against polling sites, election workers. In fact, the FBI receiving more than 2,000 threats against election workers since the 2020 election. ABC's Chief Justice correspondent Pierre Thomas tonight on the dramatic new steps, the drones, the bulletproof glass, and the National Guard now on standby. Here's Pierre.
Just hours from Election Day, local officials in battleground states tonight taking extraordinary steps to protect the votes and the workers counting them. In Maricopa County, Arizona, where some people showed up with guns during the 2020 vote count, armed guards, drones, surveillance cameras, police on horses, and a SWAT team standing by. In Detroit, the city stepping up security to avoid scenes like this in 2020, when pro-Trump supporters tried to disrupt the ballot counting. This time, officers will be in and around the building, even on the roof.
We now have bulletproof glass on the front of our building. We have more cameras. We have a panic button.
Governors in Washington, Nevada, and Oregon will have the National Guard ready for any large-scale civil disturbances. And in Philadelphia, the district attorney with this blunt warning.
Anybody who thinks it's time to insult, to deride, to mistreat, to threaten people, F around and find out. We do have the cuffs, we do have the jail cells.
And in Georgia, where election workers were under so much pressure in 2020, with Trump calling the Secretary of State looking for 11,000 more votes, tonight this message: the vote counting will be fast and fair, with results possibly as soon as tomorrow night. David.
Pierre Thomas with us too. Pierre, thank you. When we come back, the other major stories tonight: tornado watches across multiple states as we're on the air at this hour. Also, this new tropical storm forming late today and the path right to the U.S. And the well-known actor from Dawson's Creek revealing his battle with cancer tonight. And we remember Quincy Jones in a moment. Tonight, we're tracking tornado and flood watches from Texas to Oklahoma. At least 6 confirmed tornadoes touching down in Oklahoma this weekend, including an EF3 with winds up to 140 miles per hour. And we're tracking Tropical Storm Rafael, just formed in the Caribbean. The latest track showing it moving into the Gulf as a Category 2 hurricane, potentially making landfall along the U.S. Gulf Coast this weekend. We'll continue to track it. When we come back tonight, the actor from Dawson's Creek revealing his battle with cancer. Also, the scare for Coldplay singer Chris Martin falling through a trap door, and remembering Quincy Jones tonight. To the Index, Dawson's Creek actor James Van Der Beek revealing his battle with colorectal cancer. The 47-year-old actor and father of 6, known for his roles in Dawson's Creek and Varsity Blues. He says he's been privately dealing with the diagnosis. He's optimistic and he's feeling good. We wish him well. A scare on stage for Coldplay singer Chris Martin falling through a trap door while performing in Melbourne, Australia. Take a look. The singer falling backward into the hole on stage, the audience obviously stunned. He quickly got back up right there, thanking the crew down below for catching him. It's a close call. When we come back here tonight, remembering music icon Quincy Jones. Tonight, behind the scenes here for the making of We Are the World. Finally tonight here, celebrating an icon, Quincy Jones. His work with so many stars, from Frank Sinatra to Michael Jackson. And of course, Quincy Jones bringing We Are the World to life.
We are the world.
Quincy Jones was a prolific, powerful force in music for more than half a century. One of his most famous achievements, bringing together the biggest names in music for We Are the World in 1985, raising millions for famine relief. Born in Chicago, Quincy Jones got his start playing the trumpet in a band.
Mr. Quincy Jones, right there.
Eventually collaborating with Frank Sinatra, Fly Me to the Moon.
Fly me to the moon, let me swing among the stars.
While producing the soundtrack for The Wiz in 1978, he would meet Michael Jackson.
Come on and ease on down the road.
Beginning a partnership that would create some of the world's most iconic music, producing Thriller, the best-selling album of all time. Breaking barriers, a black music executive rising through the ranks in Hollywood, 80 Grammy nominations, 28 wins. He would win for We Are the World 4 Grammys, including Song of the Year. In the Netflix documentary The Greatest Night in Pop, behind the scenes as Quincy Jones coaches all of those superstars, Michael Jackson, Bob Dylan, Bruce Springsteen. Quincy Jones died at the age of 91 overnight in Los Angeles, surrounded by family. Tonight here, in his own words, on his life and longevity.
It's about hills and valleys. Anybody can handle the hills, but you find out who you are when you hit the valleys. Love, laugh, live, and give. That's what it's about.
His talent was legendary. Our live election night coverage tomorrow night, 7 p.m. Eastern. We'll see you right here tomorrow night. Good night.
ABC's David Muir, the most watched newscast in America. More Americans watch World News Tonight with David Muir than any other newscast.